here's my blender seed. We're gonna be focusing on how to make this pink part here. We're gonna start with a geometry nodes modifier, and we're gonna put a circle, a mesh circle, and fill it. And so if we connect this, we can see a circle now. I'm going to distribute points on faces and turn the density up to 100. So now we have all these points and we want to animate them so they're going outwards in a circle. So the way that we'll do that is with a set position. And we're going to basically scale their position so that they get scaled from the center to the outside of the circle. So let's take the position, scale it, and plug that into the position. And I'm going to take a scene time node and plug that into the scale. And so as I scrub through the timeline, the points are moving out, but we kind of want them to go to the edge and then return back to the center and keep doing that infinitely. So the way I'm going to do that is, first I'm gonna divide this, and the number you divide by is going to be the number of frames that are in your loop. So I'll do 24 frames, and then you can see as we go to frame 24, this is like the very edge of that circle. But then they move beyond the extent of the circle. So the way we can clamp them to the circle itself is by doing a floored modulo with a value of 1. So now you can see the points move out and then they return back to the middle. We don't want this circle that's scaling up and down. We kind of want the points to be continuously moving. The way that we'll do that is by randomizing the distance that each point travels. So I'm going to, after this divide, do an add and get a random value. So now when I press play, we have the points moving out like this. And another thing I'm going to do is, you can see that some of the points, they don't move to the full edge of the circle. They just move to like some way partially through and then they return. The way I'm gonna fix that is by taking the position and normalizing it. So now the position that's like their target position they're trying to reach is on the very edge of the circle. So now you can see all of the points are moving out and returning to the center. We want rectangles instead of points, so I'm going to use instance on points, and I'm going to make a grid and plug that into instance. So now we have a bunch of grids moving out, and I'll change the scale to something like this. Yeah. So now we want these to be oriented so they're like facing outwards. So I'll take the position again and then use align rotation to vector with the position as the vector and plug that into the rotation here, and use the y-axis to align the vector. The other thing is, now these are all intersecting with each other, so we're gonna add a little bit of z offset. So take another random value, change it to a vector, and then I'm gonna zero out everything except for z. I will put 0.1 as the maximum, and then plug that into the offset of the set position. And that messes up our rotation, So the way to fix that is by multiplying this position vector by 0 in the Z. Cool, so now they're not intersecting and they're moving out like this, and I'm gonna make them wide instead of tall. Now I'm gonna explain the color part of this. So I'm going to start by making a plane and add a new material, change it to emissive material, and the color into a image texture. And new image texture, just call it water color. Okay, and then in the texture painting tab, can hide this for a second and draw something on here. We'll do like water colors and do some pink, maybe some green. That's good for now. Let's go back to the geometry nodes and turn on the shading so we can see what's happening. We're gonna make another material for the planes. So let's name this like water grids. Oh, so just because you put the material on here, it's not gonna assign it to your grids. You have to assign it in geometry nodes. So here I'm gonna do set material, and then in here choose that water grids material. Now what we need to do is we need to sample this texture we made, which I never saved, so I have to save it. Save. So we're gonna sample that texture and use it to get the color that each of these planes is gonna pick up. So I'm going to use an image texture and then open that image we just saved. We're going to do store named attribute, and this is going to be a color attribute, and we're putting it on instances. I'm gonna call it color, and then right now let's just do red as an example, and then go back into the shading tab and see if that attribute is coming through. So use the attribute node and instancer and call it color. And why is it white? It's white because I spelled color wrong. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we can change the color in geometry nodes. So we want to use the image texture to drive the color. It's not sampling the position quite correctly because it's sampling them in the space of like 0 to 1, but this plane goes from -1 to 1. So you can see if I like scale this down and move it here, that lines up, but we want it to match the plane so that we can use the plane and then paint on the plane, and this is gonna look like how the plane looks. So the way that I'll do that is I'm gonna drag the plane into here, and I'm going to get the bounding box of the plane, and I'm going to map this position into its position relative to the bounding box of the plane. So we will take position minus the bounding box minimum and then divide it by the bounding box maximum minus the bounding box minimum. Okay, now it's in the right space. And now we have these planes and they're picking up the color of our texture. So I might go back and like make this texture look better. I mean, you can kind of figure that out. I don't need to explain that. I also don't really know how to use this texture painting mode. This is pretty much what I did in that original drawing, is I just scribbled a bunch, and then since the planes are kind of moving and it's like jittering around, it doesn't matter too much if it's ugly. I tried to add some like pinks and yellows and other colors, but keep it predominantly blue. And then also, like, since I had this plane in the actual space, I could paint, like, say if there's a tree in the scene itself, then I can paint the reflection of the tree. You can see that better here. This is the texture that I painted for this scene. We're almost done. The last thing would just be to like adjust your texture, adjust the density of these. I think I might want it more dense because you can still see the plane showing through. Let's try 200. Oh, and I'm gonna slow it down by quite a bit. Instead of 24 frames, let's say have it loop every 96 frames. In my illustration, I didn't really care about like how the center of it looked because it wasn't in the frame, but you might want it to not be so like intersecty and messy here. So one thing you could try is you could plug this value, this like distance value, into the scale, and then you'll kind of have the grids are like growing out as they move. If you want to like adjust this value, then you can use a color ramp, and then maybe instead of like growing in size slowly, I want to have them grow quickly at the beginning, and then they get to full size pretty fast. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little gradient on these. So you can see at the very edge, these planes fade out, so it looks a little bit smoother. And to do that, we need these planes to have UVs. So I'm going to do another store named attribute. I'm going to make it a 2D vector, and then this time it will be a point attribute, and I'm gonna call it UV map, and take from the grid has this UV map output, so I'll plug that in. And then if I go into the shading, I can get the UV map attribute. You see these have UVs, so I'm going to separate XYZ and take the X, plug that into a color ramp, and then make a ramp that is white in the middle and fades off to black at the ends. Mix it with a transparent shader with this color ramp as the factor. Actually, I want to switch these. Yeah, this color ramp will be the factor, and then now they're soft. And you can make them soft in the Y value too if you also do a similar color ramp with Y and then multiply them. Now it's more blurry. In the file I showed earlier, in this one, I actually have everything, or I have this at a slower frame rate. So it's only moving every 4 frames. So let me show you how to do that. In here, where we're getting the scene time, the frame, I'm gonna divide the frame by 4, and then floor it, and then multiply it by 4. This value is gonna jump every 4 frames. And you can change these numbers to be whatever frame rate you want. Okay, that's the end. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Don't like.
Don't
Don't
like,
comment.
Don't comment. Don't subscribe, and don't like. Don't even watch this video.